After learning that Jesus had silenced the Sadducees, the Pharisees got together to see what they could do. One of them, an expert in the law, tested him with this question: "Teacher, which is the greatest commandment in the law?" "Love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the greatest commandment. And the second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. All of the law and the prophets hang on those two commandments." And while the Pharisees were still gathered there, Jesus said to them, "What do you think about the Christ? Whose son is he?" "The son of David," they replied. "How is it then that David, speaking by the Spirit, calls him Lord? For he says, 'The Lord said to my Lord, sit at my right hand until I put your enemies under your feet.' If David calls him Lord, how can he be his son?" And no one had an answer for that in reply, and no one dared ask any more questions. The word from the Lord in the house of the Lord. I forgot to do the commercial early, but I'll do it now. Many of you put a commitment card in the offering plate. If you don't have one and need one, there's a good supply in a box on the white shelf back there, and we would love to have everybody do one so that we can plan better for the coming year. That's enough commercial for now. The flowers are from Fred Schaup's memorial service yesterday. We appreciated that gift back to the church. Lawyers are a strange breed. They like to trick you into things. Like they ask you questions that are almost impossible to answer, like put a man on the witness stand and say, "Have you stopped beating your wife?" You can't answer that one yes or no without admitting some kind of guilt. And that's what they were trying to do with Christ. They were trying to get him to say something that would convict him of treason, because they wanted the Roman government to put him to death. They didn't think they had the power to do it, so they were trying to enlist the Roman government in it. And he simply said to them, "Well, you asked me a question, I answered it, now you answer my question." And they had no answer for his questions. We don't have answers for the questions that Christ asks of us in our life, except to respond and to do. We're not looking to trick him up. We're not looking to make him look bad. We're not trying any of that kind of stuff. But too often we don't listen when he speaks to us. As I mentioned to the kids earlier, we need to listen, because the voices of God come from different places. Moses died at 120, and his strength was still there. So we don't know why he died. And I don't know why it's important that he died at 120. But Moses is important because Moses didn't want to go to Egypt. Moses wanted nothing to do with rescuing the people. Moses wanted nothing to do with the Exodus. He wanted nothing to do with 40 years in the wilderness. He wanted nothing to do with that. But God kept insisting and insisting until he finally had to listen and do what God wanted him to do. Paul wrote to the church at Philippi and said simply, "I keep hearing these wonderful things about you, but the last time we were there, we got run out of town on a rail." And as Abraham Lincoln once said about the fellow who was tarred and feathered and ridden out of town on a rail, he said, "If it wasn't for the honor of the occasion, I would have just as soon walked." We take so many things so much for granted. How is it that God speaks to us? How is it that God gets his message across to us? We were driving down the street or the Highway 95 when it was still 2-lane, and we were headed for Havasu City because we hadn't seen the bridge, and we were going down and see the bridge. And over here on the highway there was a billboard that said, country club living on a championship golf course. And one in our car that day with wisdom said, Gene, we better go look at this. Well, we were hooked right off the bat, because when I went in to inquire about the place, they said, if you go take a tour, we'll give you a round of golf free. The first free round of golf that ever cost me $200,000. I've had some bad days at the casino, but never quite like that. But why? We weren't even going to come to Laughlin. We weren't even going to go to Havasu City. But circumstances required that we do it. How many circumstances in your life can you look back on and not have a real good explanation for? And then doubt that God is busy, that God's speaking to you, that God's running things. He keeps poking at you until you listen to him. He keeps jabbing you until you respond. And we've all had tremendous losses in our families and in our life. And we share those tears and the hurt that we have. And we think, how could God have allowed? And yet we know that he's with us in those times. He's there in our darkest hour of need, and he's there when we go on that picnic and laugh. And he's there when we love, because he's always with us. Moses didn't want to get involved, but God just kept poking him until he finally got him involved. Most of us have denied the call, have turned him down, but he never lets up. He's always there. That's the one thing you can count on God, is that he doesn't just walk through your life. God's in your life. And he's in as deeply as you'll let him be. And he's in it over and over and over again. Like, I guess, I'm going to say, no. I can't use that one, no. But just some things are aggravating, and some things just poke at you until you finally fix it. You ever had a stone in your shoe, or worse yet, a little thorn in your sock, and you take your shoe off and you can't find it? You put your shoe back on, and it's just as miserable as it was before. And after 4 or 5 times, you check your stocking and find, oh, there's a thorn. Well, that's the way God is. Sometimes He jabs us a bit, and we look for a way out. And he jabs us again, and we look for a way out, until finally he jabs us enough that we look for a way in. Because God doesn't want us wandering around hunting for something to do. He wants us to listen. He wants us to know. He wants us to be able to understand what his call is. You see, when we drove down that road and saw that big sign, I was looking at a round of golf. But 18 years ago, Tom Maddock, who was our district superintendent at the time, called and wanted to play golf. Now, you guys know, I'm easy. If you want to play golf, I'll be there. And as we finished the round of golf, he said, would you consider a part-time, short-term appointment at a church? And I said, well, as long as it's part-time, it'd be okay. I'm just trying to figure out when this short-term part of it ends. But if we had timeshare in Vegas, and we'd been able to stay in Vegas, we would have stayed in Vegas, and we would have played golf in Vegas, and we would have not have come down the road. We would not have seen a sign, and we would not be here now. I don't know this directly what God intended, but I'm willing to let it be. Because like Moses, I didn't come here to do what I wound up doing. I didn't move to Arizona to do what I wound up doing. I didn't plan, because Most of our plans fall by the wayside unless we ground them in a source greater than ourselves. Yeah, I'm here because of a billboard on the highway. Learned to read, and look what it cost me. The wonder, though, isn't it fantastic? Stop and think. What wonderful thing has happened in your life that you didn't plan on, that you didn't expect to experience, that you had no inkling was part of it? And then understand that there aren't any coincidences in your relationship with God. Yeah, almost every one of us, if not every one of us, has had an experience of sadness, of tragedy in our life. But God is there when we weep. God is there when we smile. God is there when we laugh. But most of all, God is present when we love. For the greatest commandment is that you will love your Lord your God with all of your being and all of your soul, and that you will love one another in His name. Moses was reluctant, and he finally gave in. Most of us are just as reluctant as Moses, and most of us just have the same kinds of excuses. I don't speak well, I don't have the words, I don't. But we do, because God will place His hand on your heart. He will move you to do that which is extraordinary. He will make you His. He will love you always. Always.